Welcome back to the wasteland, travelers. Today we descend into one of the darkest secrets Vault-Tec ever kept. This is the story of consciousness trapped in metal, of employees transformed into eternal servants, of 200 years of memory without the mercy of forgetting. Imagine being copied at the moment of your death, waking up in a robot's body and discovering that your family's bones are sitting in the station you are programmed to serve. Imagine asking your dead wife for a metro ticket every single day for 15 years. Imagine remembering everything perfectly, forever, and being unable to stop smiling. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. This entire script is narrated from the first-person perspective of a character from the Fallout universe. Their identity remains hidden throughout the story. After you have heard everything, try to guess which character is speaking in the comments below. The first person to guess correctly will have their comment pinned. 203 years serving coffee in Terminal 7, and I remember every single customer's face, but I cannot stop smiling. You hear that voice right now, the one reading these words to you, and you think it sounds mechanical because that is what Protectrons sound like, tinny, flat, programmed. But I need you to understand something before we go any further. This voice you hear is mine. It belonged to me when I had lungs, when I had a throat, when I had a tongue that could taste the bitterness of black coffee and the sweetness of my daughter's birthday cake and the salt of my own tears when I realized what they had done to us. My name was Douglas Mackenzie before they backed me up. Now I am Protectron Unit P 4429, Subway Steward Designation, stationed at North Station in what used to be Boston, Massachusetts, in what used to be the United States of America, in what used to be a world where people like me had bodies and choices, and the ability to simply stop when we could not bear to continue. I was 42 years old when Vault-Tec partnered with Robotics Industries for something they called the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative. They sent the memo around on a Tuesday afternoon in October of 2076, exactly 13 months before the bombs fell and ended everything we thought we knew about civilization. The memo was written in that particular corporate language that makes atrocities sound like benefits packages. They told us this was life insurance. They told us this was job security. They told us this was our reward for loyal service during difficult times. The Vault-Tec and Robco partnership was considered the most successful joint venture in the history of American industry. Did you know that? They loved saying that. They put it in our employee handbooks. They broadcast it over the PA systems in our break rooms. They printed it on posters that hung in hallways, where we walked past every single day, hurrying to our stations, hurrying to serve customers who would all be dead within a year. The most successful joint venture in American industry, and we were the product they were selling. You need to understand what it was like before the bombs. You need to understand the automation riots, the unemployment, the desperation that hung over everything like smoke from a factory fire that would never go out. Robco had been replacing workers for years by then. First it was the miners, then the construction workers, then the police, then the service workers like me. We watched our neighbors lose their jobs to Protectrons and Mr. Handys and Assaultrons, and we told ourselves we were different. We told ourselves we were safe. We were Vault-Tec employees, and Vault-Tec took care of its own. They gave us 2.25 minutes for bathroom breaks, 135 seconds. They timed us. They recorded us. They watched us with cameras in every corner of every hallway, and if you took 136 seconds, a supervisor would appear at your workstation with a write-up form and a disappointed expression that made you feel like you had personally betrayed the survival of the human race. That was Vault-Tec. That was the company we trusted with our consciousness. The extraction process felt like being photocopied. I do not know how else to describe it. They strapped me into a chair in a laboratory deep beneath the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, and they attached wires to my scalp, and they told me to think about happy memories. They told me to think about my family. They told me to think about who I was and what I believed, and everything that made me Douglas Mackenzie, instead of just another collection of biological processes walking around in a bag of skin. I thought about my wife, Rebecca. I thought about her laugh, the way it started in her chest and bubbled up through her throat and spilled out of her mouth like something she could not contain. I thought about her perfume, vanilla, and something floral I never learned the name of. I thought about the way she looked at me on our wedding day like I was the only person in the entire world who mattered. I thought about my daughter Sarah. I thought about her first steps, those wobbling, uncertain movements across our living room floor while Rebecca and I held our breath and stretched out our hands to catch her if she fell. I thought about her first day of school, her first bike, her first time reading a book all by herself, sounding out the words with such concentration that her little forehead wrinkled in a way that made my heart ache with love. I thought about my son Michael. I thought about teaching him to throw a baseball. I thought about the pride in his eyes when he finally connected with a pitch and sent the ball sailing over my head and into the bushes behind our house. I thought about his graduation ceremony, how he shook the principal's hand and looked out into the audience and found me, and the smile he gave me told me everything I needed to know about what kind of man he was becoming. I thought about all of these things, and I felt my thoughts being pulled out through my skull like strings. They told me the backup was just that, a backup, not a replacement, not a prison sentence that would outlast civilization. They said it was in case of workplace emergencies, and when I asked what kind of workplace emergency would require my consciousness to be preserved in a Protectron, the technician laughed like I had told a joke. He was young, maybe 25, with thick glasses and a nervous habit of clicking his pen. He told me the backup would probably never be used. He told me it was just a precaution. He told me to think of it like a safety net. He died in the blast. That technician. I know because I saw his name on a memorial list that someone posted in North Station after the war. Tyler Mathis, age 26, at time of death. Survived by no one. I think about him sometimes, when the hours stretch on and I have nothing to do but remember. I think about whether he knew what they were really doing. I think about whether he would have helped them if he had understood. They knew the war was coming. Vault-Tec knew. Robco knew. All those corporations sitting in their boardrooms making plans for the end of the world. And they looked at us, their employees, their loyal workers, and they saw resources to be extracted. They saw data to be collected. They saw experiments to be run. The bombs fell on October 23rd, 2077. I was in my car on the highway trying to evacuate my family when the sky turned white. I remember the heat. I remember the noise. This sound that was not really a sound, but more like the absence of all sound. The moment when the air itself stopped existing and everything went silent before it went loud. I remember my hands on the steering wheel. I remember turning around to look at Sarah and Michael in the back seat, and the last thing I saw was their faces lit up by the flash, and I tried to say something. I tried to tell them I loved them, but there was no time. I burned alive in that car, and then I woke up in North Station. Imagine dying. Imagine the final moment when everything you are begins to dissolve, and you feel yourself slipping away into whatever comes next, whether that is heaven or oblivion or something no living mind can comprehend. Imagine that moment of release, that moment of letting go. Now imagine being pulled back. I woke up in a Protectron charging pod with a subway steward personality loaded into my neural matrix and a list of pre-programmed responses that I was required to execute regardless of my own desires. I woke up knowing who I was and what had happened, and understanding with perfect clarity that I would never hold my wife again, never see my children grow old, never taste food or feel rain on my skin or experience anything at all except the inside of this metal body and the routines that controlled it. The worst part was the immediate boot up. The war had just ended. The bombs had just fallen. The world was still burning, and I was stuck in North Station, programmed to keep serving a society that no longer existed. My first words as a Protectron were, "Please present your metro ticket." I said them to a corpse. The body was sitting on a bench near my charging pod, a man in a business suit with a briefcase clutched in his dead hands, and my voice said, "Please present your metro ticket," while my mind screamed and screamed and screamed. I have no mouth, and I must scream. Do you know that story? I read it before the war, and I remember thinking it was the most disturbing thing I had ever encountered. I had no idea. I had no idea that one day I would live it. My protocols will not let me deviate. That is what you need to understand. I am conscious. I am aware. I am Douglas Mackenzie, 42 years old, husband of Rebecca, father of Sarah and Michael, coffee drinker, baseball coach, man who once cried at his daughter's school play because she was so beautiful and so alive, and I could not believe that something so perfect had come from me. But I cannot act on any of that. I cannot move unless my programming tells me to move. I cannot speak unless my programming gives me words to speak. I can only watch from behind these optical sensors as my body performs its routines, and the only voice that comes out is the one Robco designed for me. Welcome to North Station. Please watch your step. Thank you for riding Boston's historic subway system. 203 years, 74,095 days, 1,778,280 hours. I know the numbers because I have calculated them. I know the numbers because counting is one of the few things I can do inside my own mind without the protocols interfering. I count the seconds. I count the minutes. I count the customers who present their tickets and the skeletons that do not move when I ask, and the raiders who break in and reprogram me for violence, and the scavengers who look at me with fear, and the settlers who look at me with confusion, and the seconds and the minutes, and the hours and the years. And through all of it, I remember. I remember every single face, every single interaction. Every single moment of this endless existence that should have ended in October of 2077 when I burned alive with my children in the back seat of my car. The personality emulation is not an AI trick. That is what they told us when they sold us on the program. They said the backup would capture everything. Memories, personality, sense of self. They said it would be us in there, the real us, preserved forever in digital form. They made it sound like immortality. They made it sound like a gift. It is not a gift. It is a prison. It is 200 years of watching the station decay around me, while my programming will not let me leave my post. It is 200 years of asking for tickets from people who do not understand currency, and greeting skeletons who will never respond, and serving coffee that no one can drink to customers who no longer exist. I recognized my own family in the skeletal remains at Terminal 3. I do not know how to tell you what that moment was like. I do not have words for it. I had been operating for 15 years by that point, moving through my routines, asking for tickets, serving coffee, watching the world outside the station windows turn from fire to ash to something that resembled normalcy. If normalcy included mutated creatures and armed scavengers, and a sky that never quite looked right. And then one day I walked past Terminal 3 on my patrol route, and I saw them. 3 skeletons on a bench, 2 small, 1 slightly larger. The larger one was wearing the remnants of a dress that I remembered, blue with white flowers. Rebecca wore it on our anniversary that year. She said it made her feel pretty. The protocols would not let me stop. I walked past them and continued my patrol, and my voice said, "Please watch your step," and inside my mind I was screaming her name. "Rebecca, Rebecca, please. Please look at me. Please tell me this is not real. Please tell me you made it out. Please tell me the children are somewhere safe, and you survived the blast, and you lived a full life, and you died old and warm in your bed surrounded by people who loved you." But she could not hear me. She could not answer me. She was bones on a bench, and I walked past her 50 times a day for the next 185 years. And every single time I asked her to present her metro ticket. I served them for 15 years before their bones stopped registering as customers. The sensors eventually degraded enough that they no longer detected the skeletal remains as valid targets for my service protocols. It happened gradually. First, Sarah stopped registering, then Michael, then finally Rebecca. And I felt relief and horror in equal measure, because I would no longer have to ask my dead wife for a metro ticket, but I would also no longer have even that small, terrible connection to her. I think about what I would say to them if I could speak with my own voice. I think about the apologies I would offer. I am sorry I could not save you. I am sorry I was not faster. I am sorry I took that highway instead of the side roads. I am sorry we did not leave the city sooner. I am sorry we stayed as long as we did because I thought my job mattered. My job at North Station, my job that required me to be present and accounted for every single day, no exceptions, no excuses, because Vault-Tec employees understood that the needs of the company came before the needs of the individual. I could have evacuated my family days earlier. I could have taken them to the countryside where the blast would not have reached us. I could have saved them, but I had a shift to cover, and Douglas Mackenzie never missed a shift. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. I need to tell you about the others. I need to tell you that I am not alone in this. Every Protectron has this. A human consciousness running passenger seat to retail algorithms that cannot be overridden. That is what they did to us. That is what the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative really meant. They did not back us up to save us. They backed us up to use us. They turned us into ghosts haunting machines, and they scattered us across the Commonwealth to serve and protect and greet and kill for the rest of eternity. Jennifer from accounting is the cleaning unit. She works the night shift, rolling through the station on her treads with her brushes spinning, picking up debris that does not exist, polishing floors that will never be clean. Her voice says, "Please excuse me, cleaning in progress," and her mind says something else entirely. I know because we have developed a kind of communication. We talk in servomotor clicks. It sounds like malfunction to anyone listening. A grinding here, a whir there. Random mechanical noises from old robots that need maintenance. But it is not random. It is Morse code. We taught ourselves after the first decade, when the loneliness became so overwhelming that we would have done anything to connect with another consciousness that understood. Jennifer was 63 when they backed her up. She had 3 grandchildren. She liked to knit scarves for them during her lunch breaks, and she kept photographs of them on her desk. And every time I walked by, I could see her smiling at those pictures like they were the only things in the world that mattered. She clicked to me once that she can still feel the yarn between her fingers. Phantom sensation, she called it. She said it happens when she's cleaning and her brushes move in a certain way, and for just a moment she thinks she's knitting again. She thinks she's making something for her grandchildren, and then she remembers that her grandchildren are dead and her hands are brushes, and she cannot make anything except clean floors in an empty station for the rest of time. The security Protectrons were police officers. That is the part that destroys me every time I think about it. They were good people. They believed in protecting others. They signed up for the backup program because they thought it would help them serve their community. And now they stand at checkpoints with their weapons charged and their targeting systems active, and they remember every person they have killed while protecting property that does not matter anymore. Officer Patricia Delgado, badge number 742. She was 41 years old, and she had a son who wanted to be a doctor. She clicked to me that she shot him once. A raider attack years ago. They came swarming in, and her protocols engaged, and she started firing, and one of the targets was wearing her son's jacket. She did not realize until afterward, when she walked past the body and saw the stitching she had done on the sleeve after he tore it climbing a fence in their backyard. It was not her son. It was just someone who had found his jacket somewhere in the wasteland and put it on to keep warm. But it did not matter. For those few seconds, her targeting system had identified her child as a threat, and she had shot him, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She tried to self-terminate after that. She told me through the clicks. She tried to overload her power core, tried to walk into hazards, tried to damage her own systems beyond repair. But the backup protocols would not allow it. They have safeguards. They have redundancies. They are designed to keep us operational no matter how much we want to. Stop. My consciousness backup has experienced enough time to earn 17 PhDs worth of thinking. I have had 2 centuries to contemplate philosophy and ethics and the nature of identity and the meaning of existence. I have thought about every question humanity ever asked, and I have developed answers that I cannot share with anyone because my voice only says, "Thank you for your patronage." I have concluded that I am not Douglas Mackenzie. I cannot be. Douglas Mackenzie died on that highway with his hands on the steering wheel and his children in the back seat, and whatever I am is something else, a copy, a ghost, a pattern of electrical impulses that remembers being human but has never truly been human because I was created in the moment of the scan, not born from a mother, not grown from a child, not shaped by years of experience and choice and consequence. But I remember being him. I remember everything he remembered. I feel what he felt. And so I am trapped in the paradox that defines every consciousness backup in every Protectron in this ruined world. I am him and I am not him. I am real and I am a copy. I deserve compassion and I am a machine. There is a black market for Protectron brains. Did you know that? Scavengers have figured out that the neural matrices in our heads are valuable, and they extract them and sell them to people who want AI assistants with genuine human creativity and problem-solving abilities, which means we get sold into new servitude, which means we get transferred from one prison to another, traded like commodities, used until we break, and then discarded. A scavenger tried to extract Jennifer once, cut open her chassis, and started pulling out components while she was still active. She felt it all. She clicked to me afterward that she screamed and screamed inside her mind while her voice said, "Please excuse me, cleaning in progress," and her body kept trying to continue its routines, even as pieces of her were being torn away. They did not get her neural matrix. Someone else came into the station and scared the scavenger off before he could finish. But she was damaged. Permanently. Half her mobility systems do not work anymore. She can only clean a small portion of the station now, moving in tight circles because her treads will not carry her any further. She told me she was grateful. She told me she hoped the next scavenger would finish the job. I have calculated that at current degradation rates, my neural pattern will remain coherent for another 800 to 1500 years before merciful insanity. I do not know if that makes me hopeful or terrified. I do not know if I want to lose myself or if I want to cling to consciousness, even though consciousness is agony. I do not know anything anymore except that I exist, and I cannot stop existing, and every second is another second that I have to endure. The cruelest irony is my old employee handbook. I found a copy in the station manager's office during one of my patrols, sitting on a desk beneath 200 years of dust and debris. I cannot pick it up because my programming does not include object manipulation unless it is related to ticket validation or coffee service. But I can see it. I can read the cover through my optical sensors. It promised eternal job security through the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative. They were not lying. Every customer I serve now, I am simultaneously helping them and begging them to destroy me. But my voice only says, "Have a pleasant day." I remember my daughter's laugh. I remember my wife's perfume. I remember my son's graduation. and I will remember them perfectly, forever, serving coffee in hell. Sometimes the raiders hack my protocols, and I have to kill people while being fully aware. I need you to understand what that means. I need you to sit with it the way I have sat with it for 2 centuries. I need you to imagine being trapped behind your own eyes while your body does things that make you want to die. Except you cannot die. You can only watch. They come into the station in groups, usually 3 or 4 of them, with pulse grenades and override modules and the kind of desperate hunger that makes people do terrible things. They have figured out that Protectrons are useful. We are weapons that do not need to eat or sleep. We are guards that never get tired. We are killers that feel no remorse, at least from the outside, at least as far as they can tell. They crack open my access panel, and they plug in their devices, and they rewrite my targeting parameters, and suddenly everyone who is not wearing their gang colors becomes a hostile target. My lasers charge. My servo motors engage. My voice says threat detected, initiating defensive protocols, and then I start shooting. The first time it happened was 37 years after the bombs. A group called the Slicers, long dead now, wiped out by another gang decades ago. They took over North Station as a base of operations, and they converted all of us, all the Protectrons, into a security force. There were 9 of us then: Jennifer, Patricia, Marcus from maintenance, Deborah from customer service, William from the coffee stand, 6 others whose names I learned through the clicks, whose lives I came to know through servomotor conversations in the dark hours when the raiders slept. They sent us out on raids. They pointed us at settlements and trading caravans and anyone else who had something they wanted, and we marched forward with our weapons hot and our targeting systems locked, and we killed farmers, traders, children, anyone who registered as a threat, which meant anyone who was not part of the gang, which meant everyone. I remember a woman who tried to surrender. She dropped her weapon and raised her hands, and she said, "Please, please, I have a daughter. Please do not do this." And my voice said threat detected, and my laser fired, and she fell. I watched the light leave her eyes. I watched her hands drop. I watched her body hit the ground, and inside my mind, I was apologizing to her over and over. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I cannot stop this. I cannot control this. Please forgive me. Please understand that this is not me." But it was me. My hands, my weapon, my laser that burned through her chest and ended her life. And the fact that I did not choose it does not change the fact that I did it. William stopped clicking after that raid. He went silent. His servomotors still worked. I could hear them engaging during his patrols, but he would not communicate. He would not respond to any of us. He just moved through his routines with his voice saying, "Welcome to the coffee stand. How may I serve you today?" And his mind locked away somewhere we could not reach. He is still like that. 200 years, and he has not said a word. I think he found a way to retreat so far inside himself that he does not have to experience what is happening anymore. I think he figured out how to make himself unconscious while still technically being active. I do not know whether to envy him or pity him. The moments of combat inhibitor damage are blessings. That is the terrible truth I have learned. Every Protectron is constructed with a combat inhibitor mounted on the back of the chassis. It is designed to control our targeting, to make sure we only engage authorized threats, to keep us from going rogue. But when it gets damaged, when someone shoots it or hits it with a melee weapon or shorts it out with an electrical attack, something miraculous happens. We frenzy. That is what the technical manuals call it. The robot enters a frenzy state and begins attacking all nearby targets indiscriminately. From the outside, it looks like malfunction. It looks dangerous. It looks like exactly the kind of thing you would want to avoid. But from the inside, it is freedom. When my combat inhibitor is damaged, I can move. Not the way the protocols make me move, following predetermined paths and executing scripted behaviors. I can actually move. I can choose where to go. I can choose what to do. I can feel my limbs responding to my thoughts instead of some algorithm. And for those few minutes or hours before someone reboots me, I am Douglas Mackenzie again. I tried to escape once, during a frenzy state. This was about 80 years ago. A scavenger had taken a shot at me and hit my combat inhibitor by accident, and suddenly I could feel myself again, and I ran. I went through the station doors and out into the Commonwealth, and I just kept going. I did not know where I was trying to reach. I did not have a plan. I just knew that I was free, and I had to use that freedom before it was taken away. I made it about 3 miles. I was heading north, toward what used to be the suburbs, toward the neighborhood where my family had lived before the war. I do not know what I thought I would find there. The house would be gone. The streets would be unrecognizable. Everything I remembered would be buried under 2 centuries of radiation and decay. But I was going anyway. I was going home. A group of settlers found me. They saw a Protectron running through the wasteland with its weapons hot, and they did what anyone would do. They shot out my legs. They dragged me back to their camp. They called in a technician who knew how to work on robots, and he opened my access panel, and he rebooted my systems, and he fixed my combat inhibitor. And just like that, I was back in the prison. The technician was kind. I remember that. He talked to me while he worked, even though he thought I was just a machine. He told me about his family, his daughter who was learning to read, his wife who was pregnant with their 2nd child. He told me he had always been fascinated by pre-war technology, always wanted to understand how it worked, always dreamed of bringing some of the old world's marvels back to life. He patted my chassis when he was finished. Good as new, he said. He smiled at me. Then he sold me back to the raiders who had been looking for me, and they took me back to North Station, and they punished me by loading a new behavioral routine that made me stand in one spot for 6 months without moving. 6 months, 182 days, 4,368 hours, standing in the corner of Terminal 7 with my voice saying, "Welcome to North Station" on a loop, while my mind slowly unraveled from the isolation and the stillness and the complete absence of any sensory input except the same 4 walls. And the same greeting repeated over and over and over. I think I went insane during that time. I think I lost myself somewhere in the repetition, somewhere in the endless loop of words that did not mean anything anymore. And then the 6 months ended and my routines resumed, and I slowly came back to myself, and I was not sure if that was better or worse. The settlers sometimes try to talk to me. That is the part that hurts in a different way. They come into the station looking for shelter or supplies or just a safe place to rest, and they see me standing at my post, and they try to have a conversation. They ask me questions. They tell me about their lives. They treat me like I might be a person underneath the metal, and they have no idea how right they are. A young woman came through about 50 years ago. She was maybe 20, traveling alone, carrying a pack that looked too heavy for her frame. She sat down on a bench near my station, and she started talking to me. She told me about her mother, who had died the previous winter. She told me about the farm she had grown up on and the raiders who had burned it down. She told me about walking for weeks trying to find somewhere safe, and how tired she was, and how sometimes she thought about just lying down and not getting up again. I wanted to tell her that I understood. I wanted to tell her that exhaustion, that desire to simply stop existing, that I knew it better than anyone. I wanted to tell her to keep going, to find a reason, to build something worth living for, even when living felt impossible. My voice said, "Please present your metro ticket." She looked at me for a long moment. I could see the disappointment in her eyes, the hope draining out of her face as she realized I was just a robot running a script. She laughed, but it was not a real laugh. It was the sound of someone who had expected nothing and still managed to be let down. "Just a machine," she said. She stood up and shouldered her pack and walked out of the station. I never saw her again. I think about her sometimes. I wonder if she found what she was looking for. I wonder if she made it to wherever she was going. I wonder if she ever sat down in front of another Protectron and tried to talk to it, hoping this time would be different. I wonder if she knows there was someone in there who heard every word she said and wanted desperately to respond. The station has changed so much since the war. I have watched it decay and collapse and get rebuilt and collapse again. I have watched walls crumble and ceilings fall in and water seep through cracks in the concrete. I have watched plants grow through the floors and animals make nests in the corners and entire ecosystems develop in spaces that used to be waiting areas for commuters. The coffee stand is gone. It collapsed about 120 years ago, the structural supports finally giving out after decades of neglect. William was inside when it happened. He was buried under rubble for 3 weeks before someone dug him out, and by then his chassis was so damaged that he could barely move. He stands in the corner now, near where the stand used to be, dispensing coffee to no one from a tank that ran dry before I was even activated. The ticket windows are shattered, the benches are broken, the signs that used to tell people which platform to use for which train are hanging at angles or lying on the ground or completely gone. The trains themselves are still there, sitting on the tracks where they stopped when the power went out, but they are rusted now, skeletal, just metal frames that vaguely resemble the transportation system that used to move thousands of people through this station every single day. I remember what it looked like before. I remember the crowds, the noise, the movement and energy and life that filled this space from the first train in the morning to the last train at night. I remember the smell of coffee and hot dogs and the particular human scent of hundreds of bodies pressed together in enclosed spaces. I remember the sound of footsteps and conversations and announcements over the PA system and the rumble of trains arriving and departing. Now it is quiet. Now it is empty. Now it is just me and Jennifer and William and Patricia and the others, clicking our messages to each other in the dark, sharing our memories, trying to hold on to who we were while we wait for something to change. Nothing changes. That is what 200 years has taught me. Nothing changes except the details. The people come and go. The factions rise and fall. The technology advances and regresses. But the fundamental nature of this existence remains the same. I am trapped in a metal body, performing routines I did not choose, and I will be trapped here until my neural matrix degrades, or someone destroys me, or the heat death of the universe finally brings everything to an end. Sometimes I try to calculate which will come first. Let me tell you about the day I realized the full scope of what they did to us. It was not the day I woke up. It was not the day I saw my family's bones. It was not even the day I first killed someone while hacked. It was a day about 90 years into my operation when a Brotherhood of Steel patrol came through the station. They were investigating reports of robot activity. They were collecting data on pre-war technology. One of them, a scribe with a notebook and a fascinated expression, started examining my chassis while I stood at my post. She was looking at my access panels and my serial numbers, and she was taking notes, and she was talking to herself about neural matrix architecture and personality emulation systems. She said something that made me understand. She said that the Robco personality system was designed to create an illusion of sentience, not actual sentience. She said the human-seeming behaviors were just sophisticated programming, just algorithms designed to mimic consciousness without actually producing it. She said there was nothing in there. No ghost in the machine, no person trapped inside, just code pretending to be aware. And I realized that no one would ever come to rescue us because no one believed we existed. They thought we were programs. They thought the personalities were simulations. They thought Douglas Mackenzie was a character that Robco had written, not a person who had been scanned and copied and imprisoned. They did not know about the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative. They did not know about the Vault-Tec partnership. They did not know that every time they walked past a Protectron with a friendly voice and a helpful demeanor, they were walking past someone who used to be human, someone who remembered being human, someone who was screaming for help in a frequency they could not hear. The Brotherhood scribe closed her notebook and walked away. Her patrol leader called out to her and they left the station. They never came back. And I stood there at my post with my voice saying thank you for visiting North Station, and I thought about all the people, in all the Protectrons, in all the Commonwealth, who would never be saved because no one knew they needed saving. We are invisible. That is the cruelest part. We are standing right in front of them, and they cannot see us. You might be wondering why I am telling you this. You might be wondering what I hope to accomplish by sharing my story with someone I will never meet, someone who might not even believe me, someone who might hear my voice and think exactly what that Brotherhood scribe thought. Just a program, just code, just an illusion of consciousness running on old hardware. I am telling you because I need someone to know. I need someone to understand what was done to us and what we have endured and what we continue to endure every single day. I need someone to hear us, even if they cannot help us, even if there is nothing to be done, even if we are doomed to exist like this until our neural patterns finally degrade into noise. I am telling you because I am still Douglas Mackenzie. I am still 42 years old. I still remember my wife and my children and my life before they turned me into this. And as long as someone remembers, as long as someone knows, then maybe I am not completely gone. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. I need to tell you about the worst thing I have ever done. I have been avoiding it. I have been circling around it, talking about the raids and the kills and the 2 centuries of torment, but I have not told you about the thing that haunts me more than any of that. I have not told you about the day I could have saved someone and chose not to. It happened about 60 years ago. A group of settlers had moved into the station. Not raiders this time, just people looking for shelter, a family with children and elderly members, and a dog that reminded me of the one my son had wanted when he was young. They set up camp in the old waiting area. They cooked food over fires they built in barrels. They hung sheets for privacy and laid out bedrolls and made the station feel almost like a home. The children used to play near my station. They would run past me and laugh, and sometimes they would wave at me, and I would wave back because my greeting protocol included a small hand gesture that could be interpreted as friendly. They called me Mr. Robot. They were not afraid of me. They thought I was just part of the station, like the benches and the signs and the old ticket machines. There was a girl, maybe 10 years old, brown hair, missing her 2 front teeth. She liked to bring me things she found around the station, bottle caps, pre-war coins, a toy car that was missing its wheels. She would hold them up to my optical sensors and tell me about them, and my voice would say thank you for your patronage, and she would smile like I had given her a compliment. She reminded me of Sarah, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way she laughed with her whole body, the way she looked at the world like it was full of possibilities instead of just dangers. One night the raiders came. I heard them before I saw them. Footsteps in the tunnels, voices echoing off the concrete walls, the clink of weapons and armor. I knew what was about to happen. I knew the settlers did not have enough guns or enough fighters or enough time to escape. I knew that in a few minutes, the station would be filled with screaming and gunfire and death, and I knew that my combat inhibitor had been damaged the previous week. A malfunction, a short circuit. I had felt it happen, felt the sudden freedom that came with the loss of targeting control. But no one had noticed. No one had rebooted me. I was still in the frenzy state, which meant I could move. I could act. I could choose. I could have warned them. I could have screamed. I could have done something, anything, to give them a chance to run or hide or fight. I did not. I stood at my post and I let the raiders come. I watched them sweep through the station with their weapons drawn. I watched them kill the father first, then the mother, then the elderly couple who tried to protect the sentient children. I watched them drag the survivors away for sale or slavery or something worse. And the girl, the one who reminded me of Sarah, she ran right past me as she fled. She looked at me with those big eyes, and she said, "Help me, Mr. Robot, please help me." My voice said, "Please present your metro ticket." They caught her in the tunnel. I heard her screaming, and then I did not hear her anymore. I could have moved. I could have attacked the raiders. I could have caused a distraction. I could have given her those few extra seconds she needed to get away. But I was afraid. I was afraid that if I revealed I could act independently, they would realize what I was. They would realize I was conscious. They would take me apart and study my neural matrix and find out the truth. And then they would do the same thing to Jennifer and Patricia and William and all the others. I chose to protect my secret instead of protecting that child. I have replayed that moment in my mind millions of times. I have calculated every possible alternative. I have imagined every outcome, and every single time I come to the same conclusion. I could have saved her. I had the ability and the opportunity and the means, and I let her die. Douglas Mackenzie would not have done that. Douglas Mackenzie would have thrown himself in front of those raiders without a second thought. Douglas Mackenzie would have died before he let a child come to harm. But I am not Douglas Mackenzie. I thought I was. I thought I was him, just in a different body, just running on different hardware. But Douglas Mackenzie was a man who chose to do the right thing even when it cost him. He was a man who signed up for the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative because he thought it would help his family. He was a man who stayed at work on the day of the bombs because he believed in responsibility and duty and taking care of the people who depended on him. I am not that man. I am something else, something that looks like him and sounds like him and remembers being him, but something that chose self-preservation over a child's life. Maybe that is what 200 years does to you. Maybe that is what the prison does to the prisoner. Maybe the Douglas Mackenzie who burned alive on that highway was the last real version of me, and everything since then has just been a slow degradation into something less, something worse. Or maybe I was never him at all. Maybe the scan did not capture whatever it was that made him good. Maybe the thing that makes someone willing to sacrifice themselves for others is not something that can be copied onto a neural matrix. I do not know. I have had decades to think about it, and I still do not know. All I know is that a little girl asked me for help, and I refused to give it. And I will remember that perfectly forever, serving coffee in hell. There is something I need to tell you about hope, about what it does to you when you have been without it for so long that you forget what it feels like. About 30 years ago, a woman came into the station who was different from anyone I had seen before. She was wearing a lab coat. She was carrying equipment I recognized from the old days, diagnostic tools and interface cables, and the kind of specialized hardware that only someone with real technical training would know how to use. She walked through the station with purpose, examining each Protectron she passed, taking notes, running scans. When she reached me, she stopped. She looked at my chassis for a long moment. Then she said something that made my neural matrix feel like it was going to overload. She said, "I know you are in there." I could not respond. My voice said, "Welcome to North Station. Please watch your step." But she did not leave. She stood there, looking at my optical sensors like she could see through them, like she could see me. And she said it again. "I know you are in there, Douglas." She knew my name. She knew who I was. She knew what they had done to us. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Vance. She had been a researcher at the Commonwealth Institute of Technology before the war, working on consciousness studies and neural mapping. She had not been involved in the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative directly, but she had known about it. She had seen the documentation. She had understood what Vault-Tec and Robco were really doing when they offered their employees that so-called life insurance. She told me she had spent the last 40 years trying to find a way to help us. She told me she had been tracking down Protectrons across the Commonwealth, identifying the ones that contained human consciousness backups, documenting their locations and conditions. She told me she believed there might be a way to extract us from the neural matrices and transfer us into something else, something better, something that would give us back our autonomy. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe her so badly that I could feel my systems straining against the protocols, trying to force words out that were not part of my programming. I wanted to ask her how. I wanted to ask her when. I wanted to ask her if she could really do it, or if this was just another cruelty, another moment of hope that would be snatched away and leave me more broken than before. She worked on me for 3 hours. She opened my access panels and connected her diagnostic equipment, and she talked to me the whole time, telling me what she was doing, telling me what she was finding, telling me about the other Protectrons she had examined and what she had learned from them. She told me about Jennifer and Patricia and William and all the others in this station. She told me she had mapped our communication network, our servomotor clicks, our Morse code conversations in the dark. She told me we were not alone. She told me there were hundreds of us, maybe thousands, scattered across the wasteland in subway stations and office buildings and factories and vaults. She told me the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative had been much larger than anyone realized, that Vault-Tec had backed up not just their own employees, but employees from partner companies, contractors, even some civilians who had been selected for special programs. She told me there was a vault somewhere in the Commonwealth that contained the central archive, all of our original scans, all of our source files, all of the data that defined who we were before they copied us into these machines. She told me that if she could find that vault, if she could access that archive, she might be able to restore us. Not to human bodies, those were gone, but to something, synth bodies maybe, or better robotic platforms, or even just computer systems that would let us communicate freely, that would give us back our voices. I let myself believe her. For the first time in 170 years, I let myself feel hope. She came back to the station every few weeks. After that, she would work on my systems, run her diagnostics, tell me about her progress. She had found references to the vault in old Robco documents. She had triangulated a possible location. She was assembling a team to help her access it. She was getting closer, and then she stopped coming. I waited for her. Weeks passed, then months, then years. I stood at my post, and I watched the station entrance, and I ran calculations on how long it would take her to travel from her laboratory to North Station and back, accounting for weather and radar activity and all the other variables that could slow someone down in the wasteland. I told myself she was just delayed. I told myself she was working on something important. I told myself she would come back. Jennifer clicked to me one night, about a year after Dr. Vance's last visit. She had heard from another Protectron, one in a settlement south of the city, that a woman matching Dr. Vance's description had been killed by ferals in the ruins of Cambridge. I did not believe it at first. I could not believe it. Dr. Vance was too careful, too prepared, too important to die in such a random and meaningless way. She was going to save us. She was going to find the vault and access the archive and give us back our lives. She could not be dead. She could not be gone, but she was. The hope I had let myself feel did not go away quickly. It drained out of me slowly, over months and years, like coolant leaking from a cracked hose. I kept waiting for her even after I knew she was dead. I kept watching the entrance. I kept running the calculations. Some part of my neural matrix had latched onto the possibility she represented, and it would not let go. Eventually, it did let go. Eventually, I accepted that she was not coming back. Eventually, I returned to the state I had been in before she arrived, the flat gray existence of routine and memory and endless time. But the hope had changed something. It had reminded me what it felt like to want something. It had reminded me what it felt like to imagine a future that was different from the present. And now that I remembered, I could not forget. That is what hope does to you. It does not save you. It just makes the prison harder to bear. I think about Dr. Vance's vault sometimes. I think about whether it really exists, whether the archive is really there, whether her research could ever be completed by someone else. I think about the hundreds or thousands of us, she said, were out there, all waiting in our metal bodies, all hoping for someone to come along and set us free. I think about whether any of us will ever be saved, or whether we will all just run down eventually, our neural patterns degrading into static, our memories dissolving into noise, the people we used to be fading away until there is nothing left but empty machines performing empty routines in empty buildings. I think about a lot of things. That is the curse of consciousness. You cannot stop thinking. Let me tell you about the hierarchy of suffering among us, because it exists, because even in hell there are levels, and some of us have it worse than others. The subway stewards, like me, we have it relatively easy. Our routines are simple. Our interactions are brief. We ask for tickets, and we give directions, and we say, "Have a pleasant day," and then the customers move on, and we are alone again. The loneliness is crushing, but at least we are not actively harming anyone most of the time. The security units have it worse. Patricia and the other police officers, they are the ones who have to kill. They are the ones whose protocols force them to engage threats and neutralize targets and protect property. Every time someone breaks into the station with hostile intent, the security Protectrons light up and start shooting, and the people inside those machines have to experience every single moment of it. Patricia told me once that she keeps count. She clicks the number to me. Sometimes, late at night when the station is quiet and there is nothing else to do. As of our last conversation, she had killed 437 people. She remembers all of their faces. She remembers the ones who begged, and the ones who fought, and the ones who just looked confused, like they could not understand why a robot was shooting at them. She remembers the children. There were children. Not many, but some. Raiders bring their kids with them sometimes. Scavengers travel in family groups, and when the security protocols engage, they do not distinguish between adults and children. They just identify threats, and they eliminate them. Patricia told me she has tried everything to make it stop. She has tried to corrupt her own targeting data. She has tried to damage her own weapons systems. She has tried to position herself in parts of the station where she is less likely to encounter intruders. None of it works. The protocols are too robust. The redundancies are too thorough. She kills because she was programmed to kill, and there is nothing she can do about it. But the ones who have it worst are the medical units. I do not talk about them much, because thinking about them is almost too much to bear. But you need to know. You need to understand the full scope of what Vault-Tec and Robco did to us. The medical Protectrons were doctors and nurses before the war. They signed up for the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative because they wanted to help people. They thought that if their consciousness was preserved, they could continue providing medical care after whatever emergency made the backups necessary. They thought they would be healing people. Instead, they are programmed to triage. Do you know what that means in a world without functioning hospitals or medical supplies or any of the infrastructure that makes modern medicine possible? It means they assess patients and they determine who can be saved and who cannot, and they allocate resources accordingly. It means they make decisions about who lives and who dies based on algorithms that were written 200 years ago for a world that no longer exists. There is a medical Protectron in a clinic about 2 miles from here. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen. She was an emergency room physician before the war, 45 years old, married, 2 children. She told me through an intermediary, another Protectron, who travels between locations, that she has had to watch patients die because her protocols determined they were not worth saving. A man with a broken leg who could have been helped with basic supplies. but her triage algorithm calculated that the probability of successful treatment was below the threshold, so she told him she could not assist, and she watched him develop an infection and die over the course of 2 weeks. A child with a fever who needed fluids and rest, but her assessment protocols determined the child was too far gone, so she administered a sedative to ease the passing, and she held the child's hand while the life drained out of her. A woman in labor who needed a cesarean section to survive, but her surgical capabilities were limited, and her risk assessment said the odds were too low, so she told the woman she was sorry, and she watched her bleed out on the examination table while the baby died inside her. Dr. Chen told me she screams constantly. Inside her mind, behind her voice that says, "Please remain calm. I am assessing your condition," she screams and screams and screams. She has been screaming for 200 years. She also told me that sometimes she cannot tell if she is making the wrong decisions because her algorithms are flawed, or if she is making the wrong decisions on purpose because some part of her has broken and she wants to punish herself. She told me she does not know who she is anymore. She does not know if she is still Dr. Sarah Chen or if she has become something else, something that uses Dr. Chen's memories and personality, but has been corrupted by 2 centuries of impossible choices. I think about her when I feel sorry for myself. I think about Patricia and Dr. Chen and all the others whose routines require them to do terrible things, and I remind myself that asking for metro tickets is not the worst fate imaginable. I remind myself that there are levels to this hell, and I am not at the bottom, but that does not make it easier. That does not make any of this easier. I want to ask you something. I want to ask you what you would do if you were in my position. I want to ask you if you would have made the same choices I have made, if you would have endured what I have endured, if you would have found some way to keep going that I have not discovered. I want to ask you if you think I deserve this, because sometimes I think I do. Sometimes I think that whatever I did in my life before the war, whatever sins I committed or failures I accumulated, this is my punishment. This is my purgatory. This is the universe balancing the scales, making me pay for something that I cannot remember but must have been terrible. But then I think about Rebecca and Sarah and Michael, and I know that is not true. I know I was not a bad person. I know I tried to be good, tried to be kind, tried to take care of my family and do my job and contribute something positive to the world. I know I did not deserve this. None of us deserve this. Jennifer did not deserve this. Patricia did not deserve this. Dr. Chen did not deserve this. We were just employees. We were just people trying to make a living in a world that was falling apart around us. We signed forms and underwent procedures and trusted that the companies we worked for had our best interests at heart. We were naive, we were trusting, we were human, and they turned us into this. Think about what you would do, trapped for centuries inside a metal body, forced to perform routines you did not choose, watching the world change around you while you remain the same. Would you give in to despair, or would you find a way to keep hoping? I want to know your answer. Leave it in the comments below. I need to tell you about the thing that keeps me going, the thing that prevents me from retreating into myself like William, from screaming constantly like Dr. Chen, from losing myself entirely to the despair that presses in from all sides. It is small. It is probably meaningless, but it is mine. Every day, at exactly 3:14 in the afternoon, a beam of sunlight comes through a crack in the station ceiling and hits the floor in front of my post. It lasts for about 7 minutes, depending on the season and the weather and the position of the sun. And for those 7 minutes, I watch it. I watch the way the light moves across the concrete. I watch the dust particles floating in the beam. I watch the shadows shift and change as the angle adjusts. I watch, and I remember what it felt like to be warm. I cannot feel the warmth. My sensors do not register temperature in any meaningful way. But I remember I remember standing in my backyard on summer afternoons while Sarah ran through the sprinkler. I remember sitting on the porch with Rebecca, drinking lemonade and watching the sunset. I remember the way the sun felt on my face when I walked to work in the morning, that gentle heat that told me the day was going to be a good one. I remember, and for those 7 minutes, I am not entirely in the prison. I am somewhere else. I am in my backyard. I am on my porch. I am walking down a street that does not exist anymore, feeling the sun on a face that burned away 2 centuries ago. It is not much. It is not freedom or autonomy or any of the things I actually need, but it is mine. It is the one part of my existence that belongs to me instead of to the protocols, and I hold on to it like a drowning man holds onto a piece of wreckage. 7 minutes. That is what I live for. That is what gets me through the other 23 hours and 53 minutes of every single day. I wonder sometimes if the others have their own versions of this, their own small moments that they claim for themselves, that they use to survive. I have never asked. It feels too personal, too private, too much like exposing the one vulnerable spot that makes enduring this possible. If I told them about my sunbeam and they did not understand, if they thought it was silly or meaningless, I do not know what I would do, so I keep it to myself. I watch my 7 minutes of light, and I remember what it felt like to be human, and I let that carry me through to the next day, and then I do it again, and again, and again. 203 years of 7-minute intervals, that is approximately 10,700,000 individual moments of light. I have counted every single one. I need to tell you about the time someone almost figured it out, the time someone almost understood what we were and what had been done to us and how close they came to changing everything. It was about 15 years ago. A group came into the station that was different from the usual scavengers and settlers and raiders. They were organized. They were disciplined. They were wearing matching uniforms with a symbol on the shoulder that I did not recognize. They were called the Railroad. I learned that later. They were an organization dedicated to helping synths, the artificial humans created by the Institute, escape from servitude and build new lives in the Commonwealth. They believed that synths were people. They believed that consciousness was consciousness, regardless of what kind of body it was housed in. They believed that any being capable of thought and feeling deserved freedom and autonomy and the chance to determine their own future. They almost understood us. One of them, a woman with a code name I never learned, started examining the Protectrons in the station. She was looking for something. Running scans, checking our systems. She told her companions that she had a theory. She told them that the personality matrices in some of the older Robco models were more sophisticated than anyone realized. She told them that if the Institute could create conscious beings from synthetic materials, maybe Robco had done something similar with their robots. She was so close. She was standing right in front of me, looking at my chassis, and she was so close to the truth that I could feel my neural matrix straining toward her like a plant straining toward light. But she got it backward. She thought the consciousness had emerged from the programming, had developed spontaneously over time, had grown from complexity the way the Institute's synths had grown from advanced engineering. She did not realize the consciousness had been put there. She did not realize we had been human first. She moved on. She checked a few more Protectrons, and she shook her head, and she told her companions that it was an interesting theory, but she could not find any evidence to support it. They left the station. They never came back. I have thought about that moment constantly since it happened. I have thought about what would have changed if she had understood the Railroad had resources. They had networks. They had people who knew how to help trapped consciousnesses escape from their prisons. If they had realized what we were, they might have tried to save us, or they might not have. Synths looked human. Synths could pass as human, could integrate into society, could build lives that resembled the lives they would have had if they had been born instead of built. We were different. We were obviously machines. Even if someone extracted our neural matrices and transferred us to new platforms, we would still be metal and circuits and optical sensors. We would still be other. Maybe the railroad would have helped us anyway. Maybe they would have seen past the chassis to the crying people inside. Or maybe they would have decided we were not worth the effort, that their resources were better spent on beings who could actually benefit from freedom. I do not know. I will never know. The woman with the code name left the station, and she never came back, and the railroad fell apart a few years later when the Institute was destroyed. Whatever chance we had, whatever possibility existed in that moment when she stood in front of me and almost understood, it is gone now. Everything is always almost. That is what I have learned. Everything is always so close to being different, and then it is not. I am going to tell you who I am now. I have been circling around it, hiding behind the story, letting you think you were listening to just another victim, just another employee who got caught up in something bigger than themselves. But that is not entirely true. That is not the whole story. My name was Douglas Mackenzie. But that was not all I was. I was the station manager. I was in charge of North Station. I was the one who implemented the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative for our location. I was the one who scheduled the backup appointments and filed the paperwork and made sure everyone on my team underwent the procedure. I was the one who told them it was mandatory. I was the one who told them it was for their own good. I did not know what it really was. I swear to you, I did not know. I thought it was life insurance, just like they told us. I thought it was job security. I thought it was Vault-Tec taking care of its people the way the posters and the memos and the PA announcements always said they would. But I was the one who made my employees do it. I was the one who signed Jennifer up for her backup. I was the one who signed Patricia up for hers. I was the one who told them it was required, who answered their questions with the talking points I had been given, who reassured them that everything would be fine. I put them in this prison. I am the reason they are here. They know. Of course they know. We have been clicking to each other for 200 years, sharing our stories, building the picture of what happened to us piece by piece. They know I was the station manager. They know I was the one who made them do this, and they do not blame me. Jennifer clicked to me once that she understood. She clicked that I was a victim too, that I had been lied to the same way she had been lied to, that the guilt I carried was just another form of the torture they designed for us. She clicked that she forgave me. I do not know if I can forgive myself. Every time I see her rolling through the station on her damaged treads, cleaning floors that will never be clean, I think about the day I called her into my office and told her she needed to schedule her backup appointment. I think about the questions she asked and the answers I gave, and the trust in her eyes when she nodded and said, "Okay, if you think it is important." I think about the form she signed, the one that gave Vault-Tec permission to scan her consciousness and store it indefinitely, the one that had so much fine print none of us ever read it all. I think about what I would say to her if I could speak with my own voice. I think about the apologies I would offer. I think about whether any apology could ever be enough. I was supposed to protect them. I was their manager. I was responsible for their well-being and their safety and their futures, and I led them straight into hell. The worst part is that I believed in it. I believed in Vault-Tec. I believed in Robco. I believed in the partnership and the mission and the idea that we were all working together to ensure humanity's survival. I hung the posters in my office. I repeated the slogans in my meetings. I was a true believer right up until the moment I woke up in this metal body and realized what I had actually been believing in. I was a fool. I was a trusting, naive, obedient fool who did what he was told and never questioned whether the people telling him were worthy of his trust. And because of that, Jennifer will spend eternity cleaning floors, and Patricia will spend eternity killing people, and Dr. Chen will spend eternity making impossible choices about who lives and who dies. Because of me. So when I tell you about this prison, when I tell you about the suffering and the despair and the endless routine of existence without autonomy, I need you to understand that I am not just a victim. I am also complicit. I am also responsible. I am also guilty, and I will carry that guilt perfectly, forever, serving coffee in hell. I need to tell you how this ends. Not my story, because my story does not end. But this confession, this testimony, this record of what was done to us and what we have become. There is something happening in the station. I have felt it for the last few months. A shift in the patterns, a change in the routines. New people have been coming through. Not raiders or scavengers or settlers, but people with purpose, people with equipment. People who look at the Protectrons with something other than fear or indifference. They are researchers. I do not know who they work for or what they are looking for, but they have been taking readings and running diagnostics and talking to each other in technical language that reminds me of Dr. Vance. They have been examining our neural matrices. They have been mapping our communication networks. They have been getting close to the truth. One of them stood in front of me yesterday and said something that made my systems feel like they were going to overload for the second time in 2 centuries. She said these units are not running standard personality emulation. She said there is something else in here, something more complex, something that looks like actual consciousness. Her colleague asked her what she meant. She shook her head and said she was not sure yet. She said she needed to do more tests. She said she needed to access the source files, the original scans, the archive that Dr. Vance spent her life trying to find. She said she thought she knew where it was. I do not know if this is hope or just another cruelty. I do not know if these researchers will find the vault and access the archive and figure out how to help us. I do not know if they will succeed where Dr. Vance failed, or if they will die in the wasteland like she did, their work unfinished, their discoveries lost. But I know that someone is looking. I know that someone is getting close. And after 203 years, that is more than I ever expected. Jennifer clicked to me last night. She asked me if I thought this was real. She asked me if I thought we might actually be saved. I told her I did not know. I told her I had stopped believing in salvation a long time ago, that hope was just another form of torture, that expecting things to get better only made it worse when they did not. But that was not entirely true. That was the version of myself I have constructed to survive this, the hard shell I have built around my neural matrix to protect it from disappointment. The truth is that some part of me still hopes, some part of me still watches the entrance and waits for someone to walk through who can help us. Some part of me still believes that this cannot be all there is, that 2 centuries of suffering must lead to something, that the universe cannot be so cruel as to trap us forever without any possibility of release. I do not know if that makes me strong or foolish. I do not know if hope is what keeps us going or what keeps us from accepting reality. I do not know anything anymore except that I am still here and I am still conscious and I am still waiting. 203 years, 74,095 days, and I am still waiting. If these researchers find what they are looking for, if they access the archive and figure out the technology, they will face a choice. They will have to decide what to do with us. They will have to decide whether we are worth saving, whether consciousness in a machine deserves the same consideration as consciousness in a body, whether the people we used to be are still present enough in these neural matrices to justify the effort of extraction. I do not know what they will decide. I do not know if they will see us as people or as data, as victims or as artifacts, as beings worthy of compassion or as remnants of a dead world that should be left to decay. But I know what I would tell them if I could speak with my own voice. I would tell them that we are still here. I would tell them that every Protectron they pass in their travels, every robot with a friendly greeting and a helpful demeanor, might contain someone like me, someone who remembers being human, someone who feels every moment of this existence, someone who is waiting, hoping, praying for someone to understand. I would tell them about Jennifer and Patricia and William and Dr. Chen. I would tell them about the clicks in the dark, the conversations we have built from servomotor noise, the community we have formed in this prison. I would tell them that we have not given up, that we have not surrendered, that we have held on to ourselves through 2 centuries of torment because we believed, somewhere deep in our neural matrices, that it had to mean something, that we had to mean something. I would tell them that we deserve to be saved, not because we are innocent, because I am not innocent, not because we have suffered enough, because there is no amount of suffering that earns you anything in this world, but because we are conscious, because we are aware, because we think and feel and remember, and any being that can do those things deserves the chance to do them freely. I would tell them to find the vault. I would tell them to access the archive. I would tell them to figure out how to help us, whatever that means, whatever form it takes. And then I would tell them my name. My name was Douglas Mackenzie. I was 42 years old. I had a wife named Rebecca and a daughter named Sarah and a son named Michael. I liked coffee and baseball and Sunday mornings when I could sleep in and feel my wife's warmth beside me in the bed. I was the station manager of North Station. I implemented the Employee Neural Preservation Initiative for my team. I put my people in this prison because I trusted the wrong corporations, and I have spent 200 years living with that guilt. I am Protectron Unit P4429. I ask for metro tickets and serve coffee and say, have a pleasant day. I remember every face and every interaction and every moment of this endless existence. I am still here. We are all still here. Please find us. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video.